The Irish hammer Purdue 66-7 in West Lafayette. We'll talk about the game in a couple of moments. But Tyler, one negative injuries hit the Fighting Irish on Saturday. Let's start along the offensive line.
Yeah, the irony of all ironies, Darren, is that Rocco Spindler, Pat Coogan, two guys who essentially lost their jobs in the offseason, and that really came to a head in fall camp with the emergence of Anthony Knapp, obviously, and Sam Pendleton, and then Billy Trouth just kind of locking that position down at right guard. All of a sudden, you have Pat Coogan and Rocco Spindler, two guys who started a combined 23 games for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish last year, back into the starting lineup because Ashton Craig, the junior center, he's lost for the season with a knee injury. Billy Trouth has an ankle injury. He's going to be out for a couple of weeks. And you've got Pat Coogan, who played left guard, mind you, for 13 games for Notre Dame last season. He's going to be your starting center for the rest of the season if he's able to stay healthy because, like I said, Craig is out. And then Trouth, we're really not sure how long he's going to be out. Marcus Freeman basically just said a couple of weeks, but Rocco Spindler obviously back in at a familiar position where he started 10 games at right guard last season. So like I said, kind of ironic that with injuries, Notre Dame all of a sudden gets more experienced up front, but Pat Coogan is playing a somewhat new position, if you will, because like I said, he was a guard last year and he was fighting to remain a guard in the offseason. He's going to be at center to replace Craig. And then you have Spindler. That's a familiar position for him. I thought he played well against Purdue coming in to replace Billy Trouth. So it's not the worst case scenario for Notre Dame to replace the guys that you're missing with these two seniors. But all of a sudden, if something happens, heaven forbid, to one of these guys, you're looking at a complete makeover, a complete makeshift offensive line, because now you're looking at guys like Chris Tarrick, who you wouldn't have thought was going to get any run for Notre Dame this season. He played in mop-up duty against Purdue. You're an injury away from guys like that playing. So that's the thing that happens with these injuries, Darren, is depth. It's always a depth hit. And so on the one hand, you like bringing in the two seniors. On the other hand, you're starting to drop like flies, and that's not a very good proposition for the Irish.
Tyler, it sure seemed like that defensive lineman Jordan Patello had really taken his game to another level, and he was starting to have, I thought, a tremendous game against the Boilermakers when he went down with a knee injury.
Yeah, and that knee injury, when the cart comes out and, you on the CBS broadcast, you have to cut away and go to a commercial. And then luckily I was in the press box. I was watching everything. Couldn't take my eyes off of Patello. Couldn't take my eyes off of the teammates who came to his side when he was getting on that cart, slapping him on the shoulder pad. Marcus Freeman even knelt down and kind of brushed him on the head. And you kind of knew that it wasn't going to be the best case scenario for Jordan Patello. And that is obviously the case. He's out for the season with the knee injury. And to your point, Darren, and to Marcus Freeman's point today in the press conference as well, Jordan Patello was playing the best football of his Notre Dame career. He was a menace in that game. The irony in that, there's irony all over the place, Darren, is that he injured himself on a play in which he won his rep, and he was getting to the quarterback, and he just went down awkwardly, and you kind of knew right then that was probably it for him. Just a tragic loss because it's his fifth season. You always hope that it was going to happen for him at some point. He's shown flashes. I mean, I go back to Syracuse in 2022, a couple of sacks. He was a menace in the bowl game last year against Oregon State. I guess he just likes playing against orange teams. But this year, he was playing well against everyone. And through 3 games, if you look at Pro Football Focus, he was Notre Dame's best defensive player. He had the best defensive overall grade of anyone in blue and gold, outside of KennedyEracer, who only played against Purdue. He technically had a better grade than Jordan Patello, but I'm talking a 3-game grade for Patello, Darren. It was better than anyone else's 3-game grade for Notre Dame. He was getting to the quarterback. He was winning his one-on-one battles, which is something that you hadn't seen consistently from a lot of Notre Dame players early on in this season. And it's a big loss because now, same thing with the offensive line. You're starting to rely on some guys who haven't played a lot of football, and that's Boubacar Traore, who also looked outstanding against Purdue, but he's a sophomore. Junior Tui Halamaka is a junior who hasn't really cracked the regular rotation in his Notre Dame career, and all of a sudden I'm looking at the depth chart right now. You have a true freshman in Logan Thomas, another one of those guys like Chris Tarrick, who you just didn't expect to play any meaningful football, and now he's on the verge of having to do that in the 2 deep if one more injury were to occur at the Viper defensive end position. So just, I mean, 66-7 is big time, Darren, but losing a couple of starters it's detrimental on both sides of the ball.
Tyler, this football team beat Texas A&M, came home to take on a MAC team in Northern Illinois, and lost 16-14. Afterwards, we heard Marcus Freeman talk about, my team did not handle success well. Well, you just clobbered Purdue. You're coming home to take on another MAC team, the defending champions, the Red Hawks of Miami, Ohio. Did Marcus today in his press conference discuss preparation for this matchup?
I want to start with Marcus Freeman's demeanor. And I thought I said some things last week where I'm like, man, I don't think he's responding to this NIU loss the right way, yada, yada, yada. Today I liked it. He was short. He was snappy. He flat out said, if we don't play well, Miami, Ohio can beat us. And just like Northern Illinois beat us, same conference, similar style of opponent. He said that it's all in the preparation, and you have to start believing him on that front, because it seems like they are going to prepare a little bit differently this week than they prepared against Northern Illinois. Let's face it. In the post-game press conference the other day, there were multiple players who used the word underestimate in relation to Northern Illinois. They were not fully prepared to play that football game, Darren. I fully expect Notre Dame to be fully prepared to play Miami, Ohio, because you could see it in Freeman's face. You can see it in what he's saying. He's all business. And maybe they were riding too much of a high coming after Texas A&M. Today, Darren, I didn't see any signs of riding a high. Like I said, 66-7 is big time. That's a huge victory. I don't care who you're playing in the Power 4, Power 5, whatever you want to call it. Massive, massive. That score just doesn't happen at this level of football. It did happen, but today with Marcus Freeman, you couldn't really tell that it happened, because he knows if Northern Illinois happens again against Miami, Ohio, then this carousel keeps going around, and he can't have that. And it seemed like he knew that you can't have that.
I wasn't surprised in Monday's Marcus Freeman press conference that he was asked about KennedyEracer, because in limited opportunities, Tyler, he seemed to pop up a couple of times on film.
Oh man, Marcus Freeman called him a ball hawk. I just want to call him a football player, because sitting up there in that press box, I love the bird's eye view. You could see when someone breaks on the football, and I guess that's ball hawking to a degree, but I'm talking about breaking to the football when it's just in a ball carrier's hands, not when it's in the air. He goes and tackles you, and he hits you hard, and you wouldn't really see it from his stature. Our colleague Mike Singer and Kyle Kelly, they could tell you like what he was in his recruitment. I think people were like, is he going to have the size for this? Is he going to be a Notre Dame safety? Because you think of like Kyle Hamilton over the years and some of these bigger football players that could come up and hit you. Xavier Watts isn't massive, but you look at him and you're like, okay, I mean, Notre Dame was trusting him to play some wide receiver, and you got to have some length at that position. Xavier Watts has the length. You didn't know if KennedyEracer was going to have that. He's got the pop, and that makes up for maybe some like physical things. If you can just go after the football and go and hit a guy and successfully tackle him, you're doing something right at the safety position. That's a big part of it. And then if Marcus Freeman's right, if he's also a ball hawk when that thing's in the air, all of a sudden you're talking about a complete football player. And there was a question for Freeman today framed as, hey, is the lineup missing this guy? Does he need to be out there in more meaningful situations? And that's partly because you do have Watts and you do have a Don Schuler, a sophomore, who has taken that step. I said it at the beginning of the year, Darren, in fall camp practices. I said that KennedyEracer is going to take the same step that a Don Schuler took to get into the starting lineup. And that's going to be the same time frame. You might not see Urlacher in some of these more closely contested games because Notre Dame likes Watts and likes Schuler so much. But next year, when you don't have Watts, I fully expect KennedyEracer to be a mainstay, at least in the 2 deep for Notre Dame at safety.